Yesterday, a gunman killed at least 14 people and injured dozens of others at the premiere of The Dark Knight Rises at a theater in Aurora, Colorado. There has been some speculation that yesterday's shooting took place during a trailer for the movie Gangster Squad, in which mobsters shoot at people in a theater. Warner Brothers is pulling this trailer nationwide today. On the other hand, I've heard that the shooting happened about 30 minutes into the movie. A man who called into Alex Jones's radio show said that he'd heard that a man in the theater went to the emergency exit to answer a phone call, and that 5 or 10 minutes later the shooter came in. This conflicts with the cop's story that the gunman kicked in the emergency exit door from the outside, which Jones says doesn't make sense because those doors are typically heavy and only open to the outside. A caller to the Jones show said that he goes to the theater often and that there are typically at least 2 cops in the lobby, and even up to 8 on premiere nights. You'd think that if there are usually cops there, someone would have stopped him, but with the shooter coming in via the emergency door directly into a screening room, the cops would be out in the lobby and unaware of what was happening in the screening room. The theater is allegedly a gun-free zone. The cops also say that all of the gunman's weapons, which included tear gas, were possessed legally. An article from ibtimes.com says Colorado requires no gun registration, licensing, fingerprinting, or background checks. This seemed odd to me because my analysis of gun control laws suggested that Vermont, Alaska, and Arizona, and not Colorado, were among the most gun-free states, with none of those 3 states having combinations of gun laws anywhere near as free as what the article said about Colorado. I haven't checked whether the facts on Colorado laws are accurate, but no matter how accommodating of guns they are, there will be a push for increased gun control there. More on gun control later. In regards to a possible motive, the local cops say that whether or not they have information, they would not discuss it with the press until the justice system kicks in. A local report said that the shooter killed people because the showing was sold out and he couldn't get in, which seems preposterous. There's an idea out there that the shooter may be the illegitimate son of a porn star. It would seem that if the shooter's intention was to cause as much mayhem as possible, he wouldn't have turned himself in and told cops that his apartment was booby-trapped. However, MSNBC reports that, other than warning the cops about the traps, he is not participating with police. Willingness to turn himself in, and smiling in his booking photo, could mean that the cops planned the shooting, and that the shooter knows the system will protect and support him by letting him get off for reasons of insanity, and also by giving him more visitation rights than would seem appropriate given the nature of the crime. Alex Jones points to the shooters having recently dropped out of medical school, he was a graduate studying neuroscience, as an indication that he may have been participating in a government brainwashing mind control program, which would mean he's a patsy, like the many other famous mass shooters who Jones, among others, has claimed were patsies, the shooters of JFK, RFK, Lenin, Giffords, etc. The coincidental thing is that right now the Senate is considering a ban on small guns, machine guns, handguns, rifles, possession. They need a 2/3 majority to pass the bill, and are apparently 2 votes away from getting it. Obama seems likely to sign it if it passes. Sometime soon, the UN will unveil its arms trade treaty, which has apparently been in the works for some 50 years. There's also a 1992 UN action plan called Agenda 21, which has international gun control as a goal, but which would be implemented by individual countries on a voluntary basis. Let's keep in mind the context. Only a few weeks ago, Attorney General Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress for not releasing either enough or the right information about the Operation Gunrunner Fast and Furious scandal. Liberals like Bill Maher are saying that House Republicans don't care that 200 Mexicans died as a result of losing track of the weapons, implying that they're racist gun nuts. This depiction of Republicans as racist seems to ignore the fact that the Republican leading the charge against Holder is Darrell Issa, who is part Arab, and that the death of white border agent Brian Terry is what is pissing off the Republicans more than anything else. In the midst of the Holder hearings, liberals such as Rachel Maddow dismissed what they perceived as the GOP's paranoia that the government deliberately lost track of the weapons, whose tracking devices were allegedly bought at Walmart and stopped working soon after they got into the hands of Mexican gangs, in order to excuse increased gun control in the U.S. Alex Jones and Wayne Madsen assert that the January 2011 Tucson Massacre, which saw the death of Republican-appointed federal district court Justice John Roll and the shooting of pro-gun Democratic Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, was the result of a government mind control brainwashing program, although that idea is mostly Jones's. Jones and Madsen believe that Giffords and Roll were shot because they were meeting that day with Republican Congressman Mike Conaway of El Paso to discuss the increasing number of federal court cases regarding gun smuggling by illegals. If this is true, then Rachel Maddow is wrong, and the GOP suspicions are justified. I mentioned earlier that Alex Jones believes that John Lennon's assassin was a mind-controlled patsy. It's been alleged that Mark David Chapman had worked for World Vision International, a Christian missionary charity organization that allegedly recruited spies and assassins on the behalf of the CIA. John Hinckley Sr., the father of the man who shot Reagan, John Hinckley Jr., was World Vision's CEO, as well as high up in the Vanderbilt Energy Company, and his son Scott is a close friend of Neil Bush. You can get more details about this in my video, Bush Family, World Vision, Behind JFK, Lennon, Reagan Shootings. We may remember that at the time of Lennon's death, George H.W. Bush was the director of the CIA, and the FBI was tapping Lennon's phone. Also, at the time of Reagan's shooting, Bush Sr. was the vice president, meaning that Reagan's death would have made Bush the president. Bush would have had both the interest and the connections to make that happen. We may also remember that when Reagan was shot, James Brady was paralyzed, which led to the Brady Bill that limited access to automatic weapons. Although it may seem unlikely to some that the U.S. would permit disarming of the citizens, I would point to the disarming of rich neighborhoods in New Orleans post-Katrina, neighborhoods which were not even flooded nor faced the risk of flooding. A city official stated soon after the hurricane that they would be confiscating weapons and that nobody would be allowed to be armed. A National Guard member who participated in the New Orleans confiscations said that he'd rather be in Iraq. Alex Jones conjectured that the number of military victims in the Aurora shooting could help increase political support for and garner military compliance with gun confiscations. It's also interesting to note that the international context in which these events, which carry with them the possible outcome of international gun control, are happening, which I outlined in my previous video, Seeds of World War III being sown in Syria. I will also note that yesterday in Jerusalem, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's motorcade was fired upon. This was left out of my previous video. In yesterday's broadcast, Alex Jones acknowledged that the shooting could lead to a gun ban, and noted that the shooter's victims included children and at least one baby. He noted Aurora's 13-mile proximity to Columbine High School. He believes the government assisted the shooters, and Aurora's proximity to Denver International Airport. As an aside, I would also note its proximity to the Cheyenne Mountain military base. Jones alluded to a mural in the Denver airport, a mural he and Jesse Ventura visited and analyzed in Ventura's show Conspiracy Theory, which depicts a man in a gas mask apparently murdering children, near children who were beating their weapons into plowshares, an end-times Judeo-Christian biblical prophecy. Jones noted the similarity in appearance of the man in the gas mask to the shooter, who has been alleged to have worn a Bane mask, in reference to the villain in the Batman movie, but who most likely wore a gas mask because he was spraying tear gas into the theater. Jones's apparent analysis is that the mural forewarned of the Aurora shooting, signaling the murder of children and the destruction and or confiscation of weapons as the fulfilling of biblical prophecy. In their tour of the Denver airport, Jones and Ventura noted open and explicit Masonic symbolism and Masonic support for the airport's very construction, visible throughout the building. The fact that the layout of the airport's runways strongly resembles a Nazi swastika, and the fact that there are massive construction operations nearby, which include somewhat secret underground bunkers. The shooter had his hair dyed red or orange and was wearing a gas mask. Some have said that he was dressed like Bane, the villain in the Batman movie who wears a mask, albeit not a gas mask. During or after his arrest, the shooter allegedly told police that he was the Joker, who has green hair, not red or orange, and that he is Batman's enemy. Alex Jones noted that New York Police Commissioner David Kelly acknowledged the shooting's alleged claim to be the Joker. One wonders why the commissioner of a police force located 2,000 miles away from the shooting would address it. It may have been in order to prevent copycat attacks, and I would note that I have heard that there is currently an effort to increase police presence at movie theaters in order to do the same. Alex Jones's analysis of why Kelly would weigh in on this is that he is presenting himself as fictional Gotham City Police Commissioner Gordon in order to blur the line between fiction and reality on a mass scale in the public mindset, in order to increase citizen support for and tolerance of the government as a protector. We may recall that this is not the first time that death has been caused by a blurring of fiction and reality in regards to the Batman franchise. Actor Heath Ledger, who played the Joker in the last movie, was driven to insanity and drug overdose in his method-acting approach to getting into the mind of the Joker. Alex Jones noted that the audience thought the shooting was part of the movie, and that the media often affect public desensitization to violence. Some have suggested the possibility that the shooting helped generate hype for the movie, perhaps indicating a financial incentive for Warner Brothers to have been involved. Jones apparently plans to do a symbolic analysis of the film, as it relates to the shooting, for one of his upcoming shows. Given all that I have just explained, it seems that Jones has no shortage of possibilities to consider.